The delegate from Powhatan, Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we gather here today amid a great change in the Constitution of this body. Nearly a quarter of the men and women who sat here on this side of the aisle just a year ago are gone. Swept away at the polls by the sovereign voice of the people in their ballots on November 7th. This kind of change has become a constant in our lives in a now continental society given to turbo capitalism and the continual revolution of science. Still, some realities are impervious to the emotions agitated by the media or to the ideologies by which our political parties contend for the right to govern. Still, our budget must be balanced. Still, we have problems to address that defy simple remedy. Still, we have important issues to debate and to decide. And still, we have the need to make our way to a discourse and to decisions that are worthy of the complex commonwealth that we assemble here today to serve. A little over 2 generations ago, in 1955, William F. Buckley defined a conservative as, quote, someone who stands athwart history, yelling stop at a time when no one is inclined to do so. Probably all 100 of us here today can agree on one thing, at least. That is that history did not stop, and much of the social and political order of our parents' generation has been swept away, largely by technologies and pharmaceuticals that may prove as destructive of human nature as they are alluring to human appetite. How can history be stopped or even slowed when science dissolves even whole societies, let alone individuals' ability to maintain traditional norms, and our fabled American sense of self-government and independence of judgment? A litany of thinkers has attempted to answer those questions. I call to mind to each of us people like Aldous Huxley, who described a brave new world. C.S. Lewis in perhaps a less-known but very important book, The Abolition of Man. George Orwell, with whose 1984 or Animal Farm certainly most of us are familiar. My own litany of prophetic voices about the fragility of ordered liberty and the sundry threats to human dignity derives and begins with Plato, who warns us that democracies invariably tend and end in tyranny. The framers of our Constitution understood this, and so they bequeathed us Republican, and emphatically small r, Republican forms to channel democratic passions. More recently, Jacob Burckhardt forewarned in the 1890s that the challenges of modern cities and economies would tempt the masses to choose what he called terrible simplifiers, to impose a single totalitarian remedy to the new problems of modern life. Ortega in 1932 warned of the revolt of the masses against all forms of superior achievement, and Tocqueville, a century earlier, wondered if we Americans, in our preoccupation with equality, would at last subvert liberty through what he called mass conformism that would instantiate a kind of soft despotism every bit and more tyrannical than the hard dictatorships of armed ideologies. Christopher Lasch in 1979 suggested that the social changes of Tocqueville and Burckhardt and others noticed in the 19th century led to an historical period characterized by an increasing number of individuals that Lasch described as in a state of marked narcissism with all its pathological symptoms. He was referring to us, our generation. It will come as no surprise to this audience that I define myself as a conservative. But what I constantly ask myself, can the conservative hope to conserve, to do, when constant change is the dynamic engine of our society and economy and polity? My answer is that the conservative can bear witness to certain truths that have been tested by time and transmitted by tradition. For example, no matter how high the federal debt becomes, 1 and 1 still equals 2. And no people can thrive who spend beyond their means. The day may come when voters break entirely with such truths, but still one can bear witness. This is an approach recommended by Edmund Burke, who described the cake of custom. Customs can be broken or abandoned, but even then there remains one creed, one fragment of custom, as it were, that is impervious and equal to all change. That custom is charity. Indulge a veteran of a couple decades here in these chambers to invite all of us, amid the sound and fury that will invariably occur in the coming weeks, to remember that in the end, Shakespeare found that it all signified nothing. Nothing, that is, compared to the principles and to the experiences which endure. And as an example of this, the oldest of all traditions extolled by the conservative, I deeply regret that we will not any longer be practicing one of the most ancient of all the customs of the House of Delegates. Of course, I bow to the decision of our constituted authority, but in doing so, I am compelled to bear witness to what I believe is the conservatives' obligatory response to the brave new world upon which we're entered. And so, to Delegate Ken Plum of the 36th District, no matter how I must address you presently in the chamber, and though we will continue to vote differently on a whole lot of issues, you will remain for me the gentleman from Fairfax. And the same is true for everyone in every seat in this body. For each of you has been elected to represent the constituents of your district on the terms by which you campaigned for their votes. Congratulations to each of you, and welcome especially to those who are new this year. May we differ, but never demean. May we listen as well as clamor. And may many of us emerge in mid-March, as Aristotle would have us do, in a kind of friendship that transcends solely partisan obligations and opens us to the cooperation required for us to serve our common wealth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.